Welcome to the Obstacle Dominator podcast, the show for athletes who want to become their best and inspire others in the process. Here we're going to dive deep into training tactics, race strategy, nutrition, mindset, and everything required to dominate the course and your life. Whether you're tackling your first race or already standing on podiums, this is where you can level up. There is always room for improvement, and it is time to push through those barriers and step it up a level, breaking both the physical and the mental walls to keep progressing. I'm your host, Matt Roberts, OCR athlete, coach, and guide to those committed to becoming healthier, happier, stronger, faster, to maximize their human potential now and always. I'll also be joined by the coaching team who are walking the walk, competing, staying current, and holding themselves to excellence. They are leading by example to inspire others to rise. We also bring on guest speakers who share real stories, real lessons, and proven methods that deliver results in performance, health, and mindset. Let us begin. What is happening, Matt? How are we doing?
All good, all good. It's been a while since we jumped on the last podcast, so yeah, it's good to.
I know. Yeah, I know. So really, this is the extension from the previous episode that we did a few weeks back. So today, what we're going to be talking about is planning the year ahead, and then looking at the breakdown of priority races. So categorising race importance within that. What we really need to understand first and foremost is what we discussed in the previous conversation. So having a look at the off season, because really the reflections from that determine where we're going to go in the weeks and months ahead, and none of that's really set in stone. It's all flexible and adaptable, and I'll talk about what I'm doing currently with my training and how I'm being flexible and adaptable. But during this off season period, we need to make sure that we are looking ahead, so we've got some sort of foresight. And what we like to do is obviously understand the current situation. The current situation determines where we are, and then what we want to have is the goals or the targets stretching out short term, medium term, long term, and then reverse engineering the process to really create a daily, weekly, monthly process to make those goals reality. But obviously there might be a bit of a gap in terms of reality of the situation, current situation now, and how far ahead the goals are. I actually had a conversation with a guy who's about to join the program in the new year, and he'll work under you, Matt. But he's been out of training for a few months. He's also recently had a surgery, and he needs a little bit more rest, but then he wants to do ultra distance in the mountains at altitude. So it's like, okay, you're here right now, and by the summer you want to go and do altitude ultra distance. It's like, okay, let's have a reality check here. Is that actually realistic? So that's a bit of a backstory on that. So yeah, that's what we're going to focus on, having a plan of the year, and then the internal details of that, and then some personal shares and stories from ourselves. Yeah, where should we start, Matt? Where do you think the best place to go from here is?
Well, right now I'd say is actually considering what an A, B, and C race is. Now generally for a lot of people the off season is now, so this is the time where we do planning and preparation for the next year, find out what races it is that we are looking to achieve. Yeah, effectively it's like, can we get there in that amount of time where we get the most out of our training, but we're not also stacking too much in there. So being realistic with those goals, and then coming up with a plan on how you can get there effectively. So yeah, that'll be a good place to start. Is, what races are you considering, distance, the impact it's going to have, and your ability to also be able to train for them as well. Because a lot of people will generally sign up to a race because it looks sexy and attractive, or there's a target distance, and the conditioning that, or the amount of training that you're going to need to do to get and do that race well without actually having injury or anything that could impact you. It might be actually planning ahead for that. So 6, 9, 12, even like 2 to 5 years, like you were saying, especially with the the one who wants to do high altitude, because again, that's a different stimulus. So yeah, that would be a good place to start.
Yeah, definitely. And we don't say all this to deter people. Really, it's to uplift people and encourage people to do what they want, but just be more realistic about this. So actually you can achieve it. I think we might have previously spoke about it, but myself, you, Matt, and Mitch had a call a few weeks back when we was actually talking about Mitch's goals, because we was actually helping him plan his season. And basically the bottom line come down to, it's like you've got this massive goal where you really want to set a world record. Would it be worth pushing that back 12 months? And the immediate reaction was, well, I kind of want to do it now and get it done because we've got the motivation and we feel lit up and ready to do that. But actually, if you have 12 months worth of training, delay that short-term gratification, not only would you enjoy the training more, you would perform better, but then it's trying to find balance between how far out is the goal and how are you going to get the most out of yourself, because it's not just about the adherence to the physical training. It's like life may change, things may go on. So it is important to have these A, B and C races so we're not constantly putting pressure on ourselves. So I think what we're going to chat about now is and these are just some considerations and some questions, and I'll put these on the description underneath the podcast, but it's really self-assessment, and we've done this on the last podcast. So key questions: where am I right now physically? What does my running actually look like? What distances am I actually truly conditioned for? And this is super, super important, taking into consideration what we just said about Mitch and then this other guy. Yeah, am I actually conditioned for it? Because conditioning time, mentally you might be ready, physically you may not. And also more self-evaluation if you're looking at races that you've done before, or if you're looking at races that you haven't done before, where am I losing time in races? And I'm going to go into my DEKA event as well, because that was a C race, and I'll talk about my training block and where I lost time on that. And if we're talking specifically about obstacle course racing, what obstacles cause penalties or hesitation? Yeah, what does my recovery look like? Yeah, do I actually have a recovery strategy in place? Because this is actually something that is the thing that consolidates from training and actually allows us to progress. Another thing, am I carrying injuries, niggles, limitations? And that might be physically within your own training program, or that might be within your life as well. So, assessments, we mentioned this on the last one. We need to know where we're at with various thresholds. Yeah, how far we can run, how long we can sustain that. We need to understand our strength, so doing strength assessments, having a look at videos for obstacle efficiency, having a look over the past 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, year at weekly training consistency and trends to see if there has been progress and development with the training stimulus you're providing on yourself. And then understanding life stresses and being practical and having a look at sleep and energy availability, because this is what me and Mitch were talking about on the last podcast. It's like we'll have the same amount of hours in the day, but we don't necessarily have the same energy availability due to the choices that we make in the day and within training. And this is why it's important to understand the categories of A, B and C races, because if you go too hard on a race, that will cost into the following week. And I went pretty hard on the race that I did yesterday, that was a C race, but I didn't go all out and I'm still sore. So normally Monday is a VO2 max session for me today. I'm not going to do that. I haven't done that. I just spent 25 minutes on the bike, because that's actually giving myself more rest and reducing stress, and I'm going to encourage the recovery. Okay, and without these questions and without the plan, everything is guesswork and it's really up in the air. Okay, so we need to ground ourselves, be realistic, and then once we understand that, then actually we can clarify what we need to do in the weeks, months and years ahead. Anything else to add on that, Matt?
Yeah, so I mean, again, like just to reiterate, it's not to say that you can't do like a big race or anything like that, even without the conditioning. It's just the actual impact it's going to have on you, your recovery, but also off the back of it, anytime that we do a race, our immune system, especially if we're pushing hard, our immune system's gonna go down. Like, we're going to be more susceptible to illnesses, which will then potentially take away from our total overall training blocks. And right now, I'm currently working with someone, and we're preparing him for a 100-mile race. And we've actually started that training 2 months ago at the back end of his season, so he had a little bit of recovery time. And that's how far ahead we were looking, was like April 2026. So he's currently already into a block of training to prepare him for a 100-mile race. So having the foresight, and that is his A race for the year. He's got B and C races, but that is his absolute, like, give everything race. And what we're looking to do is schedule in other races, which is going to count towards his training. But we've set the baselines, we've done the assessments, we know where he's at. He's also, focusing on recovery, like when he's not training. Yeah, I've mapped out like all his long runs for the next 6 months. Yeah, may chop and change. However, like we've got a structural baseline which he can be working towards, and like progression with time, but then tapering, taking off some of the impact as well. So, yeah, his weekly training is going to increase and whatnot. So it's not just, okay, how much this race is booked, but it's like how much time you can actually contribute towards your training as well. How many hours a week? What it is that you want to achieve out of it as well. So it's like having these questions is a really good sort of base point, because then you can come up with a strategy to effectively make that goal like more achievable.
100%. And this is so overlooked. Like, is it actually practical? Because, and this actually comes from the conversation I had the other day, and this guy, he knew where he was going wrong, and had reinforced that failure numerous times to get to the point where he's at, and really the information that we're sharing here. But I've fallen into this trap. We know many people have fallen into this trap. It's kind of like, we want it all, we want it now, therefore let's go with that. But actually we've not really taken into account current situation, how long it's going to take us to condition it, the ins and outs of life and the stresses. And then when we get and the wheels are falling off, then mentally that weighs on us heavy. Whereas actually, if we were more realistic with the time frame, and then we're flexible and adaptable along that pathway, we'd have a lot more fun, we'll get more results, and would get a better outcome when it actually comes to doing the event. And even if you don't get round to doing the event, you've had a lot of success along the way anyway. So it's kind of like win-win. But we set these outlandish goals, which we think needs an outlandish program and approach, but actually what we need is to be more consistent and apply the minimal effective dose and have some fun with it. And when we do that, progress just happens. Alright, so let's talk more about the plan then. So we're going to go into more detail about the A, B and C races, but really the vision, we should be looking 3 to 5 years out. Yeah, and this come from a recent conversation as well. It was like, if I was to do an ultra, like personally, I'd probably be looking at, I don't know, maybe 2 minimum, maybe 3 years to do that, because it would give me time to condition myself. Because if I'm gonna go and do something like that, I wanna do well. All right, so begin with the end in mind. Okay, but that doesn't mean we don't have shorter term or medium term goals within that. We do, and then that leads on to, what are we doing 3 years from now? What are we doing 8 months from now? 12 months from now? And many of our athletes have 3-year targets and goals. And how that looks is, okay, well, 12 months from now, I want to be in a position where I'm competing age group category. 18 months down the line, I want to be in a position where I'm hitting podiums. By the end of that competitive season, so in two years' time, I want to hit a national championship and get a top 3 in that. The following year, I want to do Europeans or another series and compete in the World Championships. The following year, I want to get another title. So we're layering it on and layering it on, layering it on, rather than going straight in at the deep end of competing in the World Championships and then not doing as well as you want. We want to make sure that mentally we are constructing ourselves and building confidence within ourselves, and always looking for how we are progressing and the small successes that are contained within that. So really the process, goals and outcomes, and the way that it makes us think and feel are really, really important. Okay, so we've got to be realistic. So A, B and C goals. A goals, peak races. B goals are really like they're important races, they're a priority, but they're more like a dress rehearsal, and they can lead into the A races. And then the C races are really just training races, so they're there to add some variety into the training program, so we can have some fun, test out our race plan and race conditions, and do it in the right environment with people that may make us push or perform better. Okay, so that is a really, really rough outline, but what I'll explain now is how I led up to this C race and why I really chose this. But questions to ask ourselves when we are choosing races: does this first and foremost feed into my bigger picture goal? Whether that's my long term, my medium term, my short term, it could be yes or no, but it is a consideration to have. Is this a distraction race that is actually going to take time out of training or be costly in terms of how much it beats me up, and therefore I need time off before it? I need to take time off afterwards to recover, and does that affect other training sessions? And understanding your current focuses and really what this feeds into. Anything to share on that, Matt, before I continue to go on?
So just a bit more clarity with like the definition behind like an A, B and C race. So like imagine the A race is like Spartan series. Okay, so you might have a beast, the next time you might have a sprint. Okay, those are going to be your key races for the year, and that's where you're fully tapered off. You've cleared out your life schedule, and even like the preparation the days beforehand, you're in a calmer state. Again, like things are not so much like busy in your life. So again, it's like you factored this into your life, and your training year has been built to peak around that time. Okay, so that's your A races. The B races, they're important, but they're secondary. Okay, so it's used to like rehearse your pacing, nutrition, obstacle strategy at high efforts, but with kind of like a mini taper going in, so that your training momentum continues. Okay, so this is where you've applied everything in training, and you're just going to put it to the test, but you're not going to be pushing to the absolute maximum. Okay, so you're not going to be going for that sprint finish at the end. And then C race is sort of low pressure. Just consider it like a hard training day with a bib on. Okay, so this is where you can now try different shoes, obstacles, nutrition. Okay, you can do it with friends as well, or practice specific race skills. So zero pressure on it, but it's all about getting the mileage in under race conditions, but also having the discipline just to back off, so that that it's not going to affect future training, because ultimately you are preparing first and foremost for that A race. And anything along the way is just, as Matt said earlier, it's just going to eat into your recovery and potential future training sessions. Okay, so just a little bit more clearer sort of definition on what an A, B and C race is.
Sure. So to really summarise that, A races are priority races, they are series races, championship races, ones that you really want to peak to perform on. C races are training races, and then the B races are really the middle ground. They're still important, but they're not something you really want to peak towards. Now, I want to speak to really the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, and what's involved in this. And really this is all to do with the ego. And I'm going to speak from personal experience to, well, everyone that's listening to this, and speak about my C race, because the thing that can come up, and this really highlights what sort of space you are operating from as an individual, as an athlete, by going into a race potentially with other people that you normally compete against, or other people that are going to be at the event, that competitive side can and will come out. But you've got to ask yourself, like, why am I there personally? Because ultimately it's you versus you. So if you turn up to this race that you've designated as a C race, and then one of your rivals or someone else that you normally competes there, and they start egging you on, or you're on the race course at the same time as them, and then you step over the mark in terms of the amount of effort that you put in, you're the only one that's going to suffer. But actually, if you stick to your game plan and you execute that in the way that you want, you've is that particular training week, that training block in the way that you want, which means it's going to feed into the bigger picture of the greater good. Okay, so that's definitely a consideration, but it really is about leaving the ego at the door and being okay with not hitting a podium position or not finishing in a particular time, because that's not the target, that's not the goal. Okay, it's to add some variety, add some fun in, try some new stuff, like Matt said, like new footwear, new clothing, new nutrition protocols, new strategies on obstacles or stations, whatever it may be. But also, it race week, that particular training block as well. So it really is a great opportunity to assess where you are in race conditions, but also feeding into your overall progress if done correctly. Now, I'll speak about my DEKA mile that I did yesterday. So the DEKA mile is 10 stations. You've got 10 runs of 160 meters, and then various functional fitness stations. A lot of strength and conditioning in that. So that was a C race for me. The reason that was a C race for me is I'm not going to take a B race style taper of maybe 4 days out of training to be primed for a DEKA mile where maybe I'll shave 30 seconds to a minute off. So I'd sacrifice 4 days worth of training for one event. Doesn't make sense to me. And then also, because I've gone a little bit harder on that, I'm going to need to take more time off on the other side. Or if I categorise this as a peak race, an A race, maybe 7 to 10 to 14 days before that, I would have started tapering. So I potentially lost 2 weeks before for a 20-minute race, and then I'm going to take potentially a few days off the other side to recover to that. To me, that just doesn't make sense. So we share this information to highlight the importance of the categorization of the races, because we're always thinking bigger picture. And every time you do a race, if it beats you up or you have to taper for it, it's shaving off weeks of training every single year. And if you tally that over 3 years, because you've done multiple races, that's a lot of weeks off. Over 5 years, that's even more. So what we're saying is you can have all of these things. You can have the experience, you can have the fun, but also you can have a lot of progress and other benefits to having a C race. So the C race for me was the DEKA mile. I didn't deload, I didn't taper. It was incorporated within that particular training week and that particular training block. And really, I only done maybe 5 practice sessions of the DEKA mile itself in training. So specificity, really, really important with our training. We don't want to be doing stuff that we're not going to be doing in race conditions as well. So I was testing out the stations. I was linking that into the conditioning sessions that I do, but I was factoring it into training, what I was already doing, which is really, really important. And then I went and done the C race at the back end of the week, which was actually the final day of that training block on the on phase, essentially, with the hard training weeks. And now I'm into a deload week. So it was timed perfectly within this monthly block 3 weeks of training leading up to it, and then the 4th week is rest after it. And I'm quite sore, even though I've done a C race. And on top of this, I hit a PR in DEKA mile and got first in age group. So it's like, okay, well, that wasn't my goal. That's great. That's the outcome. That's what I achieved. So what? I'm not shouting about that, because actually all of the stuff leading up to it are the successes. All of the benefits that I got out of that, and then also where I am now, those are the successes, those are the wins. The rest is just, well, the result is just a byproduct of doing everything right. And this is where the ego comes into play as well, because it's like, well, had I have done that, I could have probably done it faster. But yeah, again, that's not the goal. Like, who cares? Like, I'm not going to remember this time next year, oh yeah, I got a podium, who cares? I'm going to remember, actually, I was really consistent with my training. Yeah, and that fed into another training block, and that gave me clarity on this. And then when I hit peak for peak races, then that's going to be even better. So be mindful with these C races, but also it's not a case of you have one in every week or you have one in every month, because still that's quite taxing. Yeah, it might be you have a C race every 2 to 3 months. Yeah, especially we get into this off-season period. Here in the UK, we got fell race seasons, we've got cross-country seasons, we've got trail races. There's so much you can do, but here is the key. We, with these C races, are running that particular race at the intensity and the same volume as what you would do within training. So say, for instance, I was going to do a long run. I would look for maybe a 10k or a 15k race specific to what I do. So maybe a trail race or a blend of road and trail. But just because I'm doing a race, it doesn't mean that I race. Yeah, I just use that environment and running with other people to assess and test other things. Okay, so just remember that just because it's a race, it doesn't mean we race. Okay, it's easy to get sucked. And even yesterday when I was doing this DEKA mile, I was like, just back off. Points was on stations where I was just like looking at my watch, just like, yeah, I'm going a little bit too fast here, back off. And just taking it a little bit easier. Why? Because ramping it up a little bit more is not going to give you much more of a return on investment. Actually, it's going to be more costly. And it was fascinating actually when I was on the assault bike, and this really emphasizes it. And I found out in training, you can go that little bit harder and save yourself 20 seconds on the clock in completing the 25 calories. But actually, if you take 20 seconds less, or 20 seconds more, actually you've got more to give when you go back onto the run on the other stations. So, yeah, there's a lot to take into consideration here, but definitely take these things into consideration. It's a completely different ball game when it's A races, but the reason we have those in the calendar is because that's what we're aiming towards, the peak towards. So game plan, and then the process is training races and then peak races at a targeted time, but always learning and growing through the process. Anything to share on that, Matt?
Yeah, I was just listening there, and kind of like one of the things that we almost like very similar is I'll actually have an internal dialogue with myself, whether it be a C, B, or an A race. And like as you were saying, like, oh, I could be 20 seconds faster, but just have that little conversation. It's like, why am I here? Okay, this is for me to get experience within this. It's to help me adapt towards race conditions, yet without putting that pressure on myself. So yeah, whether it be a C race, generally it's like, okay, I'm here purely for this. Like, this is part of my training block, so let's back it off. I'll say that to myself. And then if it's like an A race, for example, like, I'm pretty strong on downhills. So when I get to the top of an uphill, And usually it's just like you go into that sort of like flattens out, and that's the time I say, oh, there's a downhill. Let's hammer it because I know that, that's my speed, my strength. So yeah, have that conversation or that dialogue with yourself, because yeah, that can just hammer home kind of the reason why you're there, or just give you enough to where you back off the gas so you actually conserve your energy. And like you were saying, towards the back end of the race, it sort of plateaus or evens out with the intensity. So yeah, just wanted to share that, because I don't know if anyone else listening back might have a dialogue while they're in training or at races, but I generally find it helps me, because it keeps me sort of like focused on the present and where I am in that moment as well.
Definitely. And we speak about it with the guys, don't we, where it's this constant self-assessment of, like, well, really using a perceived exertion scale to gauge, well, where am I right now in this particular part of the race? Because also that's really, really important. So a lot of it is about the overall race strategy, but then also the execution of the race strategy and having the confidence. And that's really where the training comes into play, and practicing what you do in training, time and time again. So when it gets to racing, it's second nature. But then also understanding not getting sucked into the crowd and other people's race plans as well. So, as we know, if we start too hard, we're going to blow up in the back end of the race, and that's so easily done, because you're like, yeah, I feel really fresh, and then 5 minutes in, you're like, oh shit, I hit it too hard there, and then you've blown up. But I think we have to kind of do that occasionally, or initially anyway, before we kind of learn that that's not the best way to do things. But also you can prepare for it in training, like we have, like do some front loaded intervals to represent that, so if you go there with a body, the mind can draw things back. And I'm certainly doing that on the DEKA. Like, I think after I come off of the there was one of the stations I come off and I was like, wow, that's really hit my legs, and I felt heavy legged, and I was like, okay, we'll just back off a little bit, take a little bit more time in that, and that's really, really important. But then also using the perceived exertion scale, so sort of like 1 to 10, 1 being lowest, like 10%, 10 being 100% effort. And this is great for Spartan race, and especially longer duration races, because when you ask yourself, where am I at right now, and can I sustain this, you're going to get a yes or no. Okay, and if the answer's, I'm 10k into this race, I've still got potentially over 10k to run, can I sustain this pace? If the answer's no, then you need to slow down. And then you can go, okay, well, where am I at on this 1 to 10 scale? Okay, I'm at 6. Okay, 6 is sustainable for where I'm at in the race. Okay, ultimately with cardiac drift and fatigue setting in, that 6 could easily take the end of the race. So you can do these self-assessments and these self-check-ins, but it's also relevant to the race distance, and where you're in that particular race. But you need to have the understanding of the ins and outs of the race before you go and do that, and the way we understand that is by practicing it in training. Cool. Anything else to add on that front before we move on?
Now you covered it. Yeah, pretty much just what I was going to highlight. So yeah, continue on.
Nice. So how do we, just for listeners, viewers, how do we typically help people plan this all out? Obviously we've spoke a lot about the script and rattled off lots of information here, but like what do you suggest, and from experience, and how we guide people through this particular process, what's the thing to do here and now at this stage of the year, based on everything we've discussed?
So yeah, as I mentioned at the start, it'd be purely like mapping out your race season, what it looks like, and then what's a key race? Generally, our body's only going to peak like maybe 3 to 4 times a year maximum. So it's like finding the race which that you want to be working towards, and working backwards from that. So as you were saying, reverse engineering. It's like, okay, cool, and like the person I'm working with for his A race in April, we've reverse engineered the process, and that is all we're working towards. So it's factoring your taper in, your recovery, periodization of your training as well. but also it's like being realistic with how much available time that you have to train. Okay, so you might be a busy working professional and you can only spare 2 hours of like or 30 minutes a day as an example. So if you've got massive goals for a particular race 6 months down the line, is it going to be achievable based on 30 minutes training a day? Or where can you maximize, within your life as well? Okay, so these are things to be considering. It's like how much time I can actually train versus the goal that I have for this. If it's completion of a race, sure. But then it's also like making sure you can plan it in so that you can be consistent with the training. Okay, and this doesn't account for like seasonal illnesses and things like that as well, because this is the time of the year where quite a lot of people will pick up a seasonal illness, which could take them out of training for a week, 2 weeks. Okay, and when you're looking at 26 weeks from now, 2 weeks off, like that's quite a substantial amount of training. Okay, and then if you then go back and try and like do that training that you've missed out on, or like within the progression, that could be quite a lot more to add. So you have to go backwards with it as well. Okay, so main consideration is what your key races are, and how you're going to get there. Okay, so working out that mileage that you need to be able to hit within training.
Sure, entirely. And I want to touch a little bit deeper on a number of those points as well, because I really agree. Matt was talking about illness, and this can be very real at this time of year for various reasons, but a lot of it is going to be stress, environment, and all of this comes down to the choices that we make and the way that we manage our energy as well. Now, occasionally often it's due to something that's going on behind closed doors. I mean, the training could be too intense, which means too much stress, or maybe you're not in a low toxic state, like you're doing detox protocols and things like that. So what I'm saying basically is look after yourself, get in contact with the earth, ground yourself, get sunshine, get fresh air, eat clean, nutritious food, get to bed on time. All of these things really mitigate that illness setting in as much as possible, because inputs equate to outputs, and if there's too much stress being input, then the output and the energy aren't going to be as much as they need. And if that's the case, then your body, your immune system will force you to rest to ensure that you do that. Okay, so really by optimizing this, it feeds into the consistency, and really that is the biggest thing for training progress. If we take time off, there's a law of reversibility, and we've talked about this on other episodes, but for however much time you spend out of training, it's probably going to take you that amount of time to get back to where you were, and then there's going to be additional weeks to build on that. Okay, so that's not only the annoyance of that, but there's it's just frustrating if that happens, basically. Another thing is, don't get caught up too much in the data. This can lead us to so many variables, and the thing I find with Garmin is if I'm training the way that Garmin wants me to, then it gives me the thumbs up and moves the points in the direction that it wants. But like yesterday, I've dropped some stats from doing the DEKA mile, and the reason I dropped those stats is because I'm doing a functional fitness thing that isn't really essentially a feature within that watch. So it thinks I'm doing a run, but I'm doing a really slow run because I'm pausing every few minutes to do a 500 meter row or something like that. So it seems to think I'm deconditioning when I'm not. Actually, it was a threshold effort which pushed my threshold forward, but because I'm not hitting the paces, then it's adjusting that. And this is why we're all big on doing lab tests, everything accurately tested on an annual basis, because if you want the accurate results, then that's what it comes down to. But you can work with the fitness trackers in such a way where we get the correct data. And actually it's a great thing for OCR if you're doing flat and fast workouts for VO2 max and threshold, because if you're constantly on the treadmill or constantly doing them on the trails, yes, you'll see the progress, you'll feel the fitness, but what might be counterproductive if your watch is you dropped to VO2 max after doing that, when actually you haven't. You've moved your fitness forward, but your watch says otherwise. So it can be counterproductive if we don't understand this as well. Final thing, and this is something that is also overlooked by individual for not doing self-assessment, but then also we've heard it from other people that have been on training programs or worked under other people, and it is assessing where you're currently at. So current situation, where am I with my fitness? Really, really important. And we do this at the end of each training block, whether that's a 4-week period, a 6-week period, an 8-week period. There will be some form of assessments within that. Why? Because if you don't know firstly, you don't know where you are. Secondly, you don't know where to go from there with specific details to make sure that everything is optimized. Therefore, you have a set target to receive a certain outcome and progress through. So testing and adjusting. But you've got to be flexible and adaptable around this. This is why we don't want to leave too long before assessments. But in equally using the previous data to construct what you do looking forward. And actually I sat with my own training, analysing it and doing some stuff last night, because it was like, I don't know where I'm going in this next training block. Why? Because I haven't finished the previous training block and haven't analysed all the data and then checked in intuitively where I'm at and actually how many weeks I've got till my upcoming race, and then also taking into account what I need to do over the next 3 weeks that needs to be done now and not in 6 weeks, because actually that could be too late or it could be too soon to do that. So there's lots of considerations, but really what we want to do is have an understanding of all these components, like where am I right now, where do I want to go, how do I bridge the gap between the two, how do I remain consistent over the long term. Okay, and when we do all this right, you keep showing up, you keep having fun, you get great results, and yeah, it just makes the process a lot more enjoyable. So aim for progress over perfection. Okay, keep the focuses simple. Don't just look for the big gains, look for the small gains and the small consistent changes over time that lead to big results. Yeah, unfortunately, and we say this to a lot of the guys, training isn't sexy. Yeah, often myself and the workouts week in, week out for months and months and months. Not a lot of people like that, but actually when done correctly it will allow us to move forward. But yet again, is if all you're doing is focusing on the training and expecting to get results, but you're sleeping like shit and eating like shit, then you're not going to get the results. So everything we talk about isn't to add more complexity, it's actually to ground you and simplify so that we can prioritize the big needle moving activities. And that might be different from every person, it will be different. Some people it's like, right, you really need to double down on the basics of the training. Another person, actually you need to make small changes here. Another person, you need to focus on the sleep. Another person, actually the energy input and output isn't correct, so we need to look at stress and lifestyle and nutrition. So there are lots of considerations, but actually we need a simplistic approach, and we can do all of these things if we set conditions to be able to do that. And that's why we've got to be realistic in every way, shape or form. Anything else to add, Matt?
Yeah, just with training intensity as well. It's like a lot of the time that I've worked with either people in the past or people that I speak to on a genuine basis, like, how's your energy? And they're telling me they're doing this amount of training, and I'm looking at them like they've grown a second head, because what they're telling me doesn't, like, they say that they've been going around in circles with the training, because yeah, ultimately they generally don't have much energy. Every training session they're doing is going bust, and they're constantly sore. So if if you are in that state where you're experiencing some of what I just mentioned, it's like, just dial it back, have a look at where you're overreaching, because again, like, tying back into this time of the year, if you are training, especially in the off season as well, this is the time where you can actually get the most benefit because the race season's over, and you can get a substantial block of training. But if you're going to be pushing it, your immune system's naturally going to come down because we're putting stress on it. Okay, and what happens with that? That's when we become more susceptible to viral infections and various other things. Okay, so like look at the train that you're doing and just make an evaluation. Okay, and like Matt's saying, it doesn't need to be like long and sexy. Most of my training sessions, my strength training, will be anywhere between 30 to 40 minutes. I don't need to be in the gym for hours. Okay, and yeah, a lot of people think more is more, and it's generally not. Okay, so yeah, like just have a look. If you're constantly low energy, it's like why, and compare that to the sleep patterns, but also what you're doing within training. Okay, so yeah, just something I was thinking about as you were saying some of that.
Yeah, 100%. All of this is really about maximizing our performance in day-to-day life and training. And when we look at the bigger picture, we can allocate time to everything. So like in the previous episode, we spoke about the off season and actually taking some time off because we need it mentally and physically for a full system like rest, recovery, reset, whatever you want to call it. And then we start ramping things up, and moving into the on season. But we don't want to go from one period straight into another period whole hog, because it can be far too much too soon with a lot more intensity. So that's where the structure of the A, B and C races come into play. So actually we're peaking towards the back end of the year, and then when we peak, we'll peak at a couple of points during the year, then we back off and we repeat the cycle. And when we do it in this way, we're constantly fresh mentally and physically, and we feel good and motivated to do it, versus feeling burned out and beaten up. So we want to look bigger picture to maximize the amount of time that we can spend in training. And what I do and what we apply is the minimal effective dose. Like, what is the bare minimum I can get out of this session, to maximize my results? And I'll talk through mine at the moment. So, and this would be very different if I was just health focused, but my zone 2 training sessions, low impact, spending 45 minutes on the bike. Not all of that's going to be in zone 2, but the aim of that is to do that. Should I be doing more? Maybe. Could I be doing more? Yes. But at the moment that's sustainable for me. But more importantly, am I getting the results that I want out of that? Yes, I am, and was actually having some conversation. We're going to go on to more specific about zone 2, lactate threshold training, VO2 max training. We'll do independent podcasts for that in the new year. But really, what we want to be doing is make sure we are kind of riding the wave of consistency, not doing too much, so that actually it's not sustainable. We've got this internal mental resistance to it, and the body screaming no. Doing enough, backing off. And then it's this repeatable effort that we can do time and time again. Alright, so that's where we want to be at, guys. So have a look at your strengths and where you're at, and either double down on that when it can, but also look at your weaknesses in areas that you want to develop as well, because this is a great opportunity this time of year in order to do that. Okay, and I realised over the past few years that my running, it is a weakness for me and something that holds me back within the sport. So what have I done? The emphasis is on that. And I'm constantly testing, adjusting, adapting and growing with consistency. And I'm excited to see where the next 2 months of training, in fact I've got about 3 months before my big A race. And I've only just finished a 2-month training block. That's all I've done. So the results I'm getting at the moment are 2 months down the line since I competed at West Virginia. That's really only since my training's picked back up. 3 more months of training consistency that then leads into another goal after that. It's really fascinating where that minimal effective dose and the consistency can really take you while you're having a lot of fun. Okay, so cool. Anything final to add or go over here?
Yeah, so patience. So like you were saying with your training, it's like a lot of people are expecting to see gains within running speed, efficiency, all of that in a very short amount of time. The body's only going to adapt as well as, one, you're recovering, but there's no time on when that's going to happen. However, what you do need to be doing is reassessing, okay? So making sure that down the line, you can actually see improvements, because, if you're doing the same thing over and over and over, and your fitness is either staying the same or regressing, then that's a sign. So again, don't be afraid, or in fact prioritize making sure that you are doing things correctly or maximizing your training. Okay, so don't expect overnight results, but if the system's not working down the line, then you need to reevaluate and potentially change things up. Okay, so just take that away from it, is, don't rush the process, be consistent, but also like listen to your body as well. Like if you're like, you've got a scheduled session in, okay, well, actually I'm not feeling it today, didn't sleep so well, it's like, okay, can I move that across? And then make sure that you consider your key training sessions for the week and prioritize those over something not so like a zone 2 training run. Okay, so prioritizing things like your VO2 max training or threshold or strength training. Okay, they're going to be the key movers. Long runs are vitally important, but you can also slow those down and blend it between jogging and walking as well. So it doesn't need to be necessarily, running for 2 hours straight. It could be a combination, especially if you are recovering from sort of low energy or fatigue and things like that. Okay, so
Yeah, entirely. There's lots to consider, because, well, with an OCR, there's actually a lot to focus on. It's not just a case of I'm running, or I'm lifting, or I'm just obstacle efficiency. I'm working towards that. It's everything, and it is a lot, and that is why it is fundamental to get the foundational level set in a good place and minimal effective dose. Because if you're trying to max out in every particular area in every particular session, you're not going to yield the results that you want. So took some value on this, guys. If you have and you want more of this, we do have a community over on School, spelled old school, so OCR School, where we've got a bunch of training videos on obstacles and a community of other people, like-minded people who want to evolve and progress and want a little bit more intimate community and support. So the option's there, and that will be below this episode, this podcast, so you can access that as well. So it'd be great to see you on the inside. Wicked. Alright, well, good to chat, Matt, and we'll do another episode in the new year. There's a few more episodes to come out yet, but we'll talk more specifically about these individual sessions. Then.
Awesome. Great to connect again, and share some info.
Cheers, Matt. See you later. Bye-bye. Bye.
Take care.
That is it for today's episode of the Obstacle Dominator podcast. Thank you for listening. If you've gained value from this episode or any others, all we simply ask is you share that with one other person. This one simple share could be the breakthrough that they need to get unstuck and start making progress again, and support more athletes to become healthier, happier, stronger and faster human beings. If you feel called, please leave a review, tap the stars, give us a rating, head over to YouTube and subscribe, or just simply follow the show. These simple action steps go such a long way in helping us reach more athletes over time, and we'd love for you to be part of that. Proximity is power. If you are an athlete that's ready to take your performance up a level, then join us over on the OCR School. This is a community where you can surround yourself with the right people as you learn and as you rise. Learn from athletes who are not just talking the talk, but walking the walk, getting results, body and mind, everyone from first-time finishers to podium winners and champions. Until next time, keep training hard, keep living prepared, and keep dominating the obstacles in life and in competition.